Citizen Kane is one of the richest films of all time. The attention to detail put into absolutely everything is astounding. Orson Welles spared no expense in making every last second of his opus a visual marvel. One of the biggest advantages of film as a medium is its potential for imitation. Welles knew full well he could simulate reality in a way that really advanced the story with the news on the march. People in the 1940s would be more than familiar with the March of Time newsreels that played before movies, and there could even have been one that played before Citizen Kane played. The sequence is compiled exclusively of B-roll footage, as March of Time generally was, while a grand-sounding narrator reads off the script. The imitation is more than the superficial, however. Take a look at the two openings and how they are nearly mirrored.
News on the march!
The March of Time. The United States today.
Further than that, the newsreel simulates the particular style and formula of the video news medium, and that is as follows. Give the audience a brief history of the context necessary to understand the meat of the story. In the case of this one March of Time segment, it is the greater and staggering importance of the American school system. In the case of the Citizen Kane News on the March segment, it is the overly fanatical spending of the hermit of a man who built Xanadu, his own private pleasure palace. What follows in both of these is an attempt to make a narrative of a real-life event. This is the point in which Orson Welles was making a satire of the American news media in a very tongue-in-cheek manner. A real-life event, more often than not, cannot be fit into the frame of a narrative. Real life holds many complexities that a short narrative cannot hold within a structure of rising and falling tensions. Real people are too complex to have their entire life stories boiled down to caricatures and still have it be accurate to everything that was going on. A life story is needed to contextualize a person's true agenda and worldviews. Welles understands this and uses this shortcoming of the news media and builds upon it with what was at the time the most complex film narrative. Even the reporters feel less than enthused about the reel after it has been completed.
How do you like it, boys?
Well, 70 years in a man's life.
That's a lot to try to get into a newsreel.
It's a good shot, Thompson, but what it needs is an angle.
Yeah.
All we saw on that screen was that Charles Foster Kane is dead.
I know that. I read the paper.
It isn't enough to tell us what a man did. You've got to tell us who he was.
Needs that angle.
This is where Welles' brilliance comes into play. The reporters try to find the meaning behind Charles Foster Kane's final utterance. The belief being that they will be able to add some new edge to their story, and that the mystery behind this word will be the missing puzzle piece in Kane's psyche. Though it is never revealed to the reporters, Rosebud is displayed for the audience as the sled that Kane had as a small boy. This revelation seemingly makes the reporters' escapade fruitless. Throughout the film, the reporters are told that Rosebud is not an identity given to any of the women in Kane's life, and even at the beginning it is stated that Rosebud may end up being a very simple thing. In the scene where Kane meets Susan Alexander, he proclaims that he is...
I was on my way to the Western Manhattan warehouse in search of my youth. You see, my mother died a long time ago, and her things were put in storage out west. There wasn't any other place to put them.
Rosebud, by and large, is an intangible object to the audience to originally get them into the story. And while it bears little importance on the surface of the events, in an emotion and character-driven story like Citizen Kane, it really cannot be classified as a MacGuffin. Rosebud, the only thing that Kane could think of on his deathbed. A sled is what his dying thoughts were composed of. This speaks volumes about Kane as a character, and what he was searching for in his life. Faced with his own mortality, and all he can think of is his childhood toy. In this beautiful bit of foreshadowing, we see Charlie Kane as a young lad playing with the sled in his own happiest moment that we see on screen. This is the happiness that disappears once he is taken away from his mother's care. Kane's happiness comes with this Rosebud in his mind. Throughout the entirety of his adult life, Kane is unhappy. He acts up in school and as a result gets kicked out. He deliberately annoys all of his superiors, and he even builds an isolated pleasure palace, hoping in vain that this will make him happy. Kane controls his wives in the name of what he thinks is love. Even his professional life is colored by the loss of the sled. His inability to control his happiness earlier in life leads him to climbing the corporate ladder so he can monopolize and control every aspect of the news and those who work for him. He feels unfulfilled in his news position, so he runs for public office to gain more control and what he hopes to be a fulfilling life. What we can draw from this is that Rosebud is truly the symbol of Kane's happiness, the je ne sais quoi of his whole character. The ironic twist of the whole plot that the reporters want to uncover but ultimately cannot. Everyone in the story is certain that Rosebud is something minuscule and that Kane is just a mysterious man. Only the audience knows the tangible nature of this Rosebud and its monumental importance to Kane. In a life of luxury and immense spending, all he wanted was his simple childhood. This mastery of film and mystery is part of what makes Citizen Kane so inspiring, even to this day amongst filmmakers. Aside from its brilliant characters and story, Kane revolutionized the way films are made and how the public views filmmaking. What young filmmakers would see in Citizen Kane is the use of deep focus to convey a wealth of visual information, the low-angle camera shots that imply a greatness, even a political defeat, mirrors that try to show Kane as the decrepit old man that he is, while Kane ignores them, and the moving crane shots that build up to a tense revelation for the audience. Steven Spielberg is heavily inspired by the great directors of yore and shows what he learns from Citizen Kane by applying the same crane technique to his own opus, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The whole film centers around a lonely researcher just trying to find the missing piece to a puzzle, and upon the discovery of the powers of this artifact, they must place it away in a warehouse where no one will find it and use it for evil. While this differs in the fine detailings from Citizen Kane, all the base elements are present. There is the plot-important object that is sought after by all, the beautiful zoom-out crane shot, and the unceremonious disposal of the object that the audience has worked their emotional cores over for the entire running time. Citizen Kane is a movie that spans several generations of filmmakers and will continue to do so for generations to come.